Hola, Simon. I'm going to do this in English just because I think it'll be easier to share with your partners and investors. So this is Mariana Leon. I'm sending you this proposal following up on our last call Thursday last week. So basically, we're going to discuss now the pathways for the money in the business of remittances with Colombia and Venezuela. This is just a very basic introduction of what needs to be addressed in order to actually set up this business and have it working legally. Okay? So please forgive me, I'm not a designer, I'm a transactional consultant. And so these items are merely just for the purpose of developing fundamental concepts for the business. Here we have the first item, basic corporate intro. So we were talking about how would that work. I was talking to you about how important it is not to create subsidiaries. So like not to do this, not to have the holding be the owner of the operational central management, or not to have a local trader in Colombia or in Venezuela that is fully owned or 51% or more owned by the holding company in Delaware. Why not? Well, because of liability. So if you actually do have some kind of asset, probably related to intellectual property and your software or your knowledge or contacts, then that would be here. That would be on your holding because you have to handle the copyright. You have to think about possibly developing a derivative item on that copyright to actually collect more royalties. We can talk about that later or in a different stage of your project. Now, one of the central things that I mentioned to you was the fact that I consider fundamental to have an operational central management corporation or limited liability corporation, several options there, that is completely separate from the holding and very likely, or at least in my opinion, should be outside of Colombia and Venezuela. So let's say for now that we would do something like maybe Wyoming, or if you don't want to be in the States, you could do Island of Man or Turks and Caicos or Cyprus, depending on what banking you're trying to design to circulate this money, as well as what kind of exchange are you going to use to create liquidity and actually do the trading. So we'll have to look into that if you're interested in this proposal, and I can develop and elaborate more on that explanation on the differences. For example, if you want to use something like, just an example, like OKCoin or Kraken or something like Binance, it has very different implications than using other means or over the counter traders that are not registered anywhere and don't have an exchange. It's completely different. Okay, so the main corporate concept that I wanted to communicate to you is that you need to be clear on liabilities, assets, and operational responsibilities. So here, my suggestion would be to keep copyright here and assets, let's say hardware even, or manuals, you know, just a wide array of possibilities there. And then an operational management company that is going to communicate with the local traders. So this company would communicate with traders, but definitely will not be an owner of the local trader corporation or business in any capacity. All right, then Let's say you have a local trader in Colombia. Who is that? Well, it has to be a company. It's not possible to do this as a regular natural person, so you have to incorporate. So the trader in Colombia is going to have a company. The trader in Venezuela is going to have another company. And certainly, you will need to have more than one trader per country. Why? Because if there is a holdup by a bank, you need to be able to circulate through another trader. And this requires a sequence for your path to circulate money. It's not the same to circulate everything through the same company and have little remittances of 190, 50, or whatever amount in dollars, less than 3,000 at least, and have it all circulating through the same company. That's going to call a lot of attention. And so, something that you have to understand, and I guess you do understand that because you mentioned it, is that, for example, in Colombia, to do this kind of remittances through crypto is simply not allowed. There isn't a law that prohibits the trading of crypto, but in the practice, banks will consider high risk such an account and will close it. Also, there is no exchange regulation category that can be adjusted to crypto. So you have to create a vehicle that would allow you to negotiate crypto within Colombian jurisdiction and circulate through their banks. So that means that it's not so easy as to have crypto or cash or a wire and sending it through crypto and declaring that. That's not how you're going to be able to declare it. You have to create a pathway that would allow this line to exist and be the path for all these traders. And that requires a specific document that, in our experience, has functioned with a future contract of purchase of Bitcoin or of purchase of Bolivares that allows a swap to crypto outside of Colombia. All right. And that's something that we can discuss later if you're interested, because it's rather complex and is proprietary to our firm in this moment. So please do let me know if you want to know more about it. Now, we're going to discuss some basic transnational risks. These are elements, like areas that you have to consider to actually function. And so the whole of funds by the banks, it's a main risk. It happens continuously, not only with companies that are handling remittances, but just common business. The banks in Colombia have the right to put a hold on your funds for 6 months, practically arguing any reason related to your proceedings or to the origin of funds. So, the other side of this is that exchange regulations categories are very complex. It's hundreds of categories. So it's not like you're going to be able to find an exchange category to reflect origin in Colombia, saying that you purchased some crypto elsewhere or bolivares, because there is no wire between Colombia and Venezuela, not using bolivares. Maybe you could arrange a wire through Panama, or you could arrange a wire of dollars through a different country. But definitely, you have two sets of exchange regulations in place. One in Colombia, which is very, very different than the one in Venezuela that just changed actually a couple of weeks ago. So the other area is origin of funds, and this is about your procedure to maintain the origin. If you are thorough with this item, you can have a successful business. Building the books, how to build a trading book, how to build a liquidity book for remittances based on crypto is a fundamental element to have a successful company. If you don't appreciate how important this is, and this is not just some KYC of asking an ID and just keeping it in your files, It's a lot more than that because you're going to have to eventually show it to the banks if needed or to authorities for exchange. So it needs to be arranged in accordance with the law. What laws, Mariana? Since we don't know that there is a law in Colombia for this, correct? But there are treaties. Those treaties are international accounting treaties, and it's called the Basilea or Basileia in English agreement. Is like the foundation of proceedings for banking in transnational operations, and so you would have to create a variation of these proceedings for your entity. Okay, so you let me know if you want to know more about that in the future. We're going to now go to the next item: risk of managers. People often ask, like, oh, what are the risks of the managers, of the board of directors? Like, how does it work? Well, the owner, the legal representative, or the officer of a corporation in Colombia, Venezuela, any island of the Caribbean, or Panama will have civil liability exposure, criminal liability, and personal. What do I mean by this? Civil liability will reflect in whatever lawsuits, origin of funds claims, and how to handle funds from third parties. The criminal side of it has to do with exchange regulation issues. Like if they if they do not follow the procedure that we designed for this structure, they can effectively end up in jail. It's not a game. This is something that people managing the companies as traders need to understand very clearly. And usually, what happens is that the owners are outside of the country and they get some local guy or girl to sit there and say, I'm the legal representative, and, just pay them whatever salary, maybe $500 or something like that, very small, almost nothing. And they're facing all of this. They are the ones who face that. I've seen people operating without the proper procedure go to trial in both countries because of a breach of exchange regulation. The personal side of it is that once people are known publicly as traders or as representatives, they are facing a reasonable risk of being involved in some kind of extortion by authorities. That happens in Venezuela and it happens in Colombia. So you're entering a territory that is very, very hard to handle. That's why the manuals, the operational manuals, are so very important. Are is the only thing you could offer to somebody who's going to work for you, to have those manuals and to have a plan of action to protect them. If not, it's basically unreasonable to accept such a position. We can talk more about this, have some examples. Of course, I'm bound by confidentiality in many cases, but I can totally disclose the concepts that are important in this case. Let's go to the next one: the origin of funds. So you're going to have three types of origin of funds. You're going to have wires, you're going to have cash, and you will have crypto. So, three different types of proceedings. The wire type is relatively easy to handle. We have plenty of examples. We can rely on many of the banking institutions and just elaborate similar policies, like Itaú, for example, is something that I use often. Now, when you handle cash, if you're going to, which you're very likely to be in the position of handling cash just because of the nature of this business, that requires a specific trading book for cash so that you can actually comply with your duty to keep the origin of funds. You have limits here in different areas. We can talk about it later if you want, but I just wanted to point this out. Now, crypto will also have a trading book with origin. It's not the same to show the origin of cryptocurrency, whether it's Bitcoin, Pax, Ripple, or any other, than to show the origin of wires. So these are three separate items. Think about it as three types of money that you need to create pathways for. Lastly, the central corporate manager will require a manual just to control this kind of thing, as we have been discussing through this introduction. And then the local traders will need a procedure to follow so that you can be certain that your company as a business is sustainable. Okay? Very important documents: Central Corporate Manager and local trader procedures. Licenses, please allow me to say that deregulation has caused important challenges, but in the case of crypto, you simply can't do it in Colombia. It's prohibited. So there is a solution, of course. We've done it before, it works. It consists of a derivative contract that allows a swap in a different country before going to Venezuela or to Colombia. So this is something we would have to discuss in more detail, discussing permutas, which is a swap. It's a specific type of swap that we've designed for this. It's legal. It has the right category. It works. If you want to do this, then it's important that you know that that option exists. And that's basically your main issue. You do not have a license that you can obtain to do this in Colombia. You could perhaps obtain some kind of license in Venezuela, which is unlikely, but you could obtain it. But anyways, once you resolve this problem in Colombia, you will not need another license. It's very likely that you can just go ahead with your business without getting into banking licenses in either country, or at least that would be the goal. All right. So we have done this before. Our prices range from 13,000 to 15,000, depending on your choice of corporate layout. And we include all the structural setup that we discuss here and 30 days of training for the managers. Okay, that's what is included in this price. So I hope you've enjoyed this introduction. I hope you understand our perspective on this, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation. All right, thank you so much for your attention. Bye bye.